Okay, so today we're tackling Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
Right.
Yeah.
This figure who, you sent over this lecture by Dr. Michael Heiser, and he's barely mentioned in the Bible, but there's just so much to unpack about him and about all these ancient kings and prophecies and all this stuff.
Yeah, he's a fascinating case.
Yeah. So
just a few verses in Genesis,
right.
But his influence ripples.
Yeah, and he's tied to some huge things, like the Messiah and all this stuff. So
absolutely.
Let's just start right at the beginning.
Okay.
So Genesis 14, we meet this guy Melchizedek.
Right.
And we know he's the king of Salem, and he's the priest of the Most High God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of it.
Yep. That's all we get.
But those titles...
Right.
even those alone raise so many questions.
Yeah, we're in unusual territory right from the start.
Yeah.
That combination of king and priest was rare in the ancient Near East.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really thought-provoking because Dr. Heiser connects this back to Adam in the garden.
Interesting.
Oh, Adam, too, was meant to rule.
Yeah.
And to act as a mediator between God and humanity.
So is Melchizedek some echo of that original ideal? Or
possibly.
Yeah. Interesting.
And his name itself is a puzzle.
Yeah.
It's often translated as King of Righteousness. Mm-hmm. But as Dr. Heiser points out, there's a deeper linguistic layer here.
Okay.
In ancient Hebrew, Zedek could also refer to a Canaanite god associated with justice.
Wait, so Melchizedek's name could be a reference to a Canaanite god?
It could.
That's huge.
Yeah, it adds a new dimension.
Yeah.
It suggests that Melchizedek, and potentially those he ruled, might have held religious beliefs that were different from what later became mainstream Israelite religion.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if he's called a priest of the Most High God.
Right.
Is that the same God that Abraham worshipped, or is that something else entirely? This gets into some really complex ideas about how the ancient Israelites maybe even understood God.
It does. Some scholars believe that early Israelites might have initially perceived Yahweh as having attributes similar to Canaanite deities.
Oh, wow.
And over time, those ideas evolved, and Yahweh became the sole God, absorbing those other roles and attributes.
So that's a huge shift in thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It highlights how religious ideas can change and develop over time, often through encountering and integrating elements from other belief systems.
That's so interesting. So we have this mysterious figure, Melchizedek, who is a king and a priest, possibly connected to Canaanite religion, and he blesses Abraham.
He does.
And this is all happening in a place called Salem, which you said is like Jerusalem before the Israelites conquered it.
Exactly. Yeah. And even Salem itself might have connections to a Canaanite deity. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of these different religious ideas converging in Melchizedek's world. It's really a melting pot of beliefs.
It's mind-blowing to think about all these influences swirling around at that time.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And you mentioned one more layer to this, the Sederic connection.
Right. Dr. Heiser cites the scholar Bernard Bateau, who suggests that Sederic, a Canaanite god associated with justice, might have been absorbed into later Israelite religion as an attribute of Yahweh.
So to clarify for our listener, who exactly was Sederic in the Canaanite pantheon?
He was a complex deity, often associated with justice, kingship, and even the underworld.
Really?
His role varied depending on the specific Canaanite city or region.
Wow.
The key takeaway here is that his attributes, particularly his association with justice, seem to have resonated with early Israelites who may have seen parallels with their own understanding of Yahweh.
So it's possible that some of the characteristics we now associate with Yahweh might have originated from earlier Canaanite beliefs about gods like Sederic?
That's one interpretation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a reminder that religious ideas rarely emerge in a vacuum. They often build upon and transform existing beliefs, integrating new concepts and understandings over time.
So we've established that Melchizedek is a complex figure with potential ties to Canaanite religion. But now to really get to the heart of why he's so significant, we need to jump ahead in the biblical narrative.
Yes, because Melchizedek doesn't just disappear after Genesis 14. He reappears in a surprising way much later in the Old Testament.
Okay.
And that's where things get really interesting.
I'm all ears. Tell me more.
We see Melchizedek being invoked in Psalm 110.
Okay.
Which speaks of a future king, a messianic figure, who will be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
Now that's a connection I wouldn't have expected.
Right.
What does it even mean to be a priest after the order of Melchizedek?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And to answer it, we need to consider how people in the Second Temple period, the time between the Old and New Testaments, interpreted this connection. Because for them, Melchizedek wasn't just some historical footnote.
Right.
He was a key to understanding the Messiah.
For those who might not be familiar with the term, what exactly is the Second Temple period?
It's a crucial period in Jewish history.
Okay.
Spanning roughly from the 6th century BC to the 1st century AD.
Okay.
It's named for the Second Temple in Jerusalem.
Got it.
Which became a central focus of Jewish religious and cultural life.
Okay.
Crucially, this is the period when many of the ideas and expectations about the Messiah were developed and debated.
Got it. So how did people in this period view Melchizedek?
Their interpretations were varied.
Yeah.
And sometimes quite surprising.
Yeah.
You see, you sent over some fascinating material on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
Well, some of those texts, written by Jewish scholars during the Second Temple period, actually portray Melchizedek as a divine being.
Whoa.
They even go so far as to identify him with the Elohim, who judges other gods in Psalm 82.
A divine being. So to them, Melchizedek was more than just a king and a priest.
Right.
He was something much greater, a figure of immense power and authority.
Exactly. And this tells us a lot about how some Jewish thinkers were wrestling with the concept of the Messiah.
Yeah.
They were trying to make sense of this figure who was prophesied to be both a king and a priest.
Yeah.
And perhaps even divine.
It's fascinating how these different threads, like kingship, priesthood, divine judgment, all seem to converge in the figure of Melchizedek.
They do.
And it sets the stage for a huge shift in understanding when we get to the New Testament and the arrival of Jesus.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The way the New Testament, particularly the book of Hebrews, interprets Melchizedek in relation to Jesus is crucial for understanding Christian theology.
So let's dive into that. What's so special about Jesus being a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek? Yeah. All right. So we've got this mysterious Melchizedek, right? Who suddenly pops up again in Psalm 110. And he's like directly linked to this future messianic king.
Right.
And then the book of Hebrews really leans into this whole connection.
It does. Hebrews takes that Melchizedek typology and really runs with it.
Okay.
Using it to make some really profound points about the nature of Jesus' priesthood.
Right. And it uses some pretty cryptic language.
It does.
To describe Melchizedek.
Yeah.
It says he's without father, mother, without genealogy.
Right.
Having neither beginning of days nor end of life. It's almost like he's being described as a divine being.
It's definitely language that grabs your attention.
Yeah.
And some scholars do interpret those verses literally.
Okay.
Arguing that the author of Hebrews believed Melchizedek was some kind of supernatural being. Like an angel, perhaps.
That's a pretty wild interpretation.
It is.
But you're suggesting a different approach, right?
Yeah, I think we need to read those descriptions in light of the overall message of Hebrews.
Okay.
The author's trying to emphasize the eternal
and transcendent nature of Jesus' priesthood. Okay. Not necessarily to make Melchizedek himself into a supernatural figure.
Gotcha. So how does Melchizedek, this human priest king, how does he resemble the Son of God, as Hebrews puts it?
Well, think about the contrasts being drawn here.
Okay.
Melchizedek's priesthood, unlike the Levitical priesthood, wasn't based on lineage or genealogy. It seemed to come directly from God and had no clear beginning or end.
So Melchizedek's priesthood represents something different, something that goes beyond the limitations of human ancestry.
Yes.
And foreshadows the eternal priesthood of Christ.
Exactly.
Interesting, Hebrews even points out that Melchizedek blesses Abraham.
He does.
The father of the Israelite nation.
That's right.
And so this kind of establishes a spiritual authority.
It does.
For Melchizedek's priesthood.
Yes.
Which is then carried forward.
Right.
And finds its ultimate fulfillment in Christ.
Precisely.
So it's like a spiritual lineage.
Yeah. That bypasses the typical rules of inheritance.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Is the author of Hebrews trying to downplay the importance of the Levitical priesthood by doing this?
Well, remember, Hebrews was written to Jewish Christians.
Right.
Who were grappling with their faith in Jesus, while also deeply rooted in their Jewish heritage.
Right.
And the Levitical priesthood was a central part of that heritage.
Yeah.
So the author is carefully showing how Jesus' priesthood is not only valid, but superior to the one they had always known.
So he's not dismissing the Levitical priesthood entirely.
No.
But he's showing how it points to something greater,
right.
Something ultimately fulfilled in Christ.
Exactly. And he uses Melchizedek as a bridge to make that point.
Okay.
If Abraham, the father of the Jewish nation, acknowledged Melchizedek's authority as a priest,
right,
then surely his descendants should recognize the even greater authority of Christ, who is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
That's a powerful argument. And it makes sense given the historical context. You mentioned earlier that Jesus being born in a Jubilee year adds another layer of significance to this whole Melchizedek connection.
It does.
Can you unpack that a bit more for us?
Absolutely. So the year Jesus was born, 3 BC, was a Jubilee year.
Okay.
A time of release and restoration according to Jewish law.
Okay.
It's very possible that early Christians were aware of this and saw it as a powerful sign that Jesus was ushering in a new era of freedom and reconciliation.
Okay, but how does that relate to Melchizedek?
Well, you sent over some research on Second Temple texts.
Right.
And it turns out that some of those texts, particularly 11 Melchizedek from the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually describe Melchizedek as a figure who brings about a jubilee.
Interesting.
A time of liberation and restoration.
So both Jesus and Melchizedek are associated with this idea of a jubilee.
They are.
A time of spiritual and social renewal. It's like they're both heralding a new era.
And that resonates deeply with the Christian message of redemption and new life in Christ. It's through this lens of Jubilee that we can better understand the significance of Jesus's eternal priesthood.
Okay.
It's a priesthood that breaks the chains of sin and restores us to right relationship with God.
It's almost like a cosmic reset.
Yeah.
A return to the original goodness that God intended for creation. I'm seeing now how this idea of Melchizedek being a type of Christ connects back to something we talked about earlier. The idea that Adam was also a type of Christ.
That's a great connection.
Yeah.
Both Adam and Melchizedek, in different ways, foreshadow aspects of Christ.
Yeah.
Adam, in his original role as ruler and priest, points to the ideal that is fully realized in Jesus.
So it's not that Melchizedek is literally a divine being.
Right.
It's about him representing a primordial ideal, a blueprint that finds its perfect expression in Christ.
You've got it. And this brings us back to the significance of Jesus being a priest for ever after the order of Melchizedek. It's a priesthood that's different, set apart, not bound by the limitations of human lineage or the Levitical system.
Right.
It's eternal.
Yeah.
Just as Christ himself is eternal.
So what does all this mean for Christians today?
You're right.
How does this Melchizedek typology inform our understanding of who Jesus is and what he came to do?
It tells us that Melchizedek, while a historical figure, primarily serves as a typological foreshadowing of Christ.
Okay.
He's a symbol, a pointer, a way for us to grasp the unique and eternal nature of Jesus's priesthood and his role as the ultimate mediator between God and humanity.
He's like a character in a play who hints at the arrival of the main protagonist.
Yes.
Right, preparing the audience for something truly extraordinary.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
He prepares the stage for Christ, who fulfills everything Melchizedek represents and more. And it's through this lens of typology that we can appreciate the depth of that Melchizedek connection.
Yeah.
It's not about Melchizedek being divine himself, but about him pointing us to the one who truly is divine.
Right.
Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the eternal high priest.
This has been so insightful.
Good.
It's amazing how these seemingly minor details in the Bible, like the story of Melchizedek, can hold such profound meaning.
It reminds us that God's plan is intricate and multifaceted.
Yeah.
Even seemingly obscure passages
can
be threads in this grand tapestry of redemption.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are the key takeaways about Melchizedek that you think are most important for our listener to remember? Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
Melchizedek's mysterious name.
Right.
His possible ties to Canaanite religion and how he foreshadows Jesus as this eternal high priest. It's really mind-blowing stuff.
It challenges us to think deeply about how seemingly minor details in the Old Testament can unlock a richer understanding of the New Testament and of God's plan for humanity.
Exactly. And you mentioned there's like one more layer to this whole Melchizedek typology.
Right.
Something that connects him to like the very nature of God himself. I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Well, let's go back to that initial description of Melchizedek in Genesis 14.
Okay.
He's the king of Salem,
yeah,
which we've said is probably an early name for Jerusalem.
Right. And we discussed how Salem itself might have connections to a Canaanite deity, but you're suggesting there's more to it than that, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
What if Salem also points to something deeper? Something beyond those Canaanite roots?
Okay.
What if it hints at the very essence of God?
Okay.
The divine reality that underpins all of creation.
That's a fascinating thought. I mean, the Bible often describes God as dwelling in unapproachable light,
right,
as inhabiting a realm beyond human comprehension. But at the same time, he clearly desires to be known by us.
Yes.
To have a relationship with humanity.
Exactly. So the question becomes, how does God bridge that infinite gap between his transcendent nature and our finite existence?
And you're saying Melchizedek might be part of the answer?
I believe so. Consider this.
Okay.
Melchizedek is both king and priest. He embodies both authority and the role of a mediator.
Right.
In a sense, he represents a meeting point, a bridge between the divine and the human.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he's a prototype for Christ,
right,
who is the ultimate bridge,
yes,
the one who perfectly reveals God to us,
yes,
and reconciles us to him.
You've got it.
Yeah.
And this is where the name Salem becomes even more significant.
Okay, remind me, what's the deeper meaning there?
Salem is closely related to the Hebrew word shalom, which means peace.
Right.
But biblical peace isn't just the absence of conflict.
Right.
It's a state of wholeness, of right relationship with God and with each other.
That deep, abiding peace that surpasses understanding.
Precisely. And this shalom ultimately flows from God himself. He is the source of true peace.
Yeah.
The one who reconciles all things.
So Salem as both a place and a concept points us towards like the very heart of God's being, to his inherent peace, and his longing for fellowship with us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Melchizedek, as the king of Salem, embodies that peace, and acts as a mediator of it. He prefigures Christ,
right,
the one who brings true and lasting peace, the Prince of Peace.
Wow, it's all coming together now. Right. So we're seeing Melchizedek not just as like a foreshadowing of Christ's roles as king and priest, but also as like a symbol pointing to the very nature of God. His peace, his love, his desire for a relationship with us.
It's a profound insight and invites us to go even deeper in our understanding of Melchizedek and his place in God's grand narrative. It's not just about rescuing us from sin and death. It's about restoring us to a state of shalom.
Wow.
To that original harmony and wholeness that God intended for creation.
It's incredible how much depth and meaning is packed into these few verses about Melchizedek.
Right.
He's like this hidden key that unlocks a whole new way of seeing God's plan unfolding throughout history.
And it reminds us that the Bible is full of such hidden keys waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
There's always more to explore, more to learn, more to marvel at. Keep digging, keep asking questions, and let the scriptures lead you deeper into the heart of God's mystery and love.
Well said. I know I'm definitely going to be thinking about Melchizedek in a whole new light now.
Good.
And that final thought about Salem pointing to the nature of God.
Right.
That's something I'm going to be pondering for a long time. Thank you so much for taking us on this incredible deep dive.
You're welcome.
It's been an amazing journey.
The pleasure was all mine. Remember, the journey of discovery never truly ends.
Right.
May your pursuit of knowledge and understanding always lead you closer to the heart of God.